What if I told you the most dangerous woman you'll ever meet will never hit you, never betray you, never scream at you? Instead, she will teach you how to tolerate your own collapse. Men today don't fall because of war, poverty, or failure. They fall for something far quieter. They fall for their own willingness to compromise standards, one quiet surrender at a time. You weren't broken by heartbreak. You weren't destroyed by rejection. You were destroyed the moment you smiled at what you should have walked away from. This is how modern men die, not with bullets, but with small betrayals of self-respect camouflaged as patience. They call it love. But Confucius would call it spiritual suicide. Because when you allow dysfunction to disguise itself as passion, you're not in love, you're financing your own erosion. You believed you were being kind. You believed you were being patient. But patience without discipline is submission. Kindness without standards is self-erasure. The undisciplined woman won't attack you directly. She'll pull you into her emotional vortex and drain your masculinity piece by piece while you convince yourself you're saving the relationship. She doesn't crave peace. She craves control. And every time you soften your standards to avoid her rage, you don't create harmony. You feed the storm that will one day consume you. Confucius warned. To see what is right and not do, it is want of courage. The question is not whether she's dangerous. The real question is how much of yourself are you willing to lose before you finally walk away? Men rarely break all at once. They don't wake up one morning and lose their strength, their frame, their masculine clarity. No. The collapse of a man is far more subtle. It doesn't arrive like a storm, it arrives like a slow leak. 1,000 tiny compromises that most never even notice. And the first crack always begins with tolerance. Not tolerance for pain, not tolerance for adversity, but tolerance for the one thing that silently rots a man from the inside, the erosion of his standards. The moment you start smiling at disrespect, the moment you call rebellion passion, the moment you confuse chaos for love, that's when your collapse begins. You weren't destroyed by her beauty. You weren't destroyed by her rejection. You weren't even destroyed by her betrayal. You were destroyed by your own inability to walk away from what you should have never allowed. That is how dangerous women win, not by fighting you, but by training you to surrender yourself. At first, it's always small. She tests your boundaries. You hesitate. You don't want conflict. You think it's not worth the argument. And right there, you've taught her the most dangerous lesson, that your standards are negotiable. Punchline after punchline. She doesn't have to overpower you. She only has to exhaust you. She doesn't steal your frame. She waits while you slowly abandon it yourself. Modern men are not collapsing because women have changed. They're collapsing because they've been trained to fear being alone with their standards. In the name of keeping the peace, you lose your peace. In the name of love, you lose your dignity. In the name of understanding, you allow her chaos to rewrite your reality. Confucius warned long before modern relationships ever existed. The gentleman understands virtue. The small man understands profit. But modern men, they chase neither virtue nor profit. They chase chaos dressed in perfume, with entitlement in her tone and manipulation in her silence. She doesn't even need to raise her voice. She simply waits while you silence your instincts. You call it maturity. You call it patience. You call it compromise. But let's be brutally honest. What you're really doing is self-erasure. Every time you swallow your truth to avoid her emotional explosion, every time you tolerate disrespect because you're afraid to lose her, every time you lower your standards because you crave validation, you surrender another piece of your masculine frame. You think you're keeping her, but in reality, you're losing yourself. The most dangerous collapse doesn't happen when a man is defeated. It happens when he's too comfortable tolerating slow, spiritual suicide, one quiet compromise at a time. Because here's the truth most men refuse to face. She's not breaking you. You're breaking yourself for her. And one day you'll look in the mirror and realize the man she once admired no longer exists, not because she destroyed him, but because he abandoned himself to keep her comfortable. You didn't lose her. You lost the version of you that refused to be disrespected. That's how the collapse begins. That's how dangerous women win without ever lifting a weapon. They don't have to attack you. They simply convince you to stop defending yourself. You thought compromise would save the relationship. You thought sacrificing your standards would buy you peace. But compromise with chaos doesn't create peace. It creates a prison. At first, it feels harmless. You let her cross a small boundary because you don't want to seem controlling. You ignore the disrespect because you don't want to escalate the argument. You swallow your truth because you want to keep the harmony. But harmony built on silence is not harmony. It's emotional blackmail disguised as love. Every time you yield to her instability, you teach her that your standards are negotiable. And the woman who learns that your standards are flexible will never respect you again. She doesn't crave your love. She craves control. Control over your reactions. Control over your decisions. Control over your masculinity. And the price you pay is yourself. You trade your standards for her comfort. You trade your voice for her approval. You trade your clarity for her emotional safety. And you call it love. But love without standards is slavery. And slavery wrapped in intimacy is still slavery. Confucius warned, when words lose their meaning, people lose their freedom. Today, dysfunction is called passion. Rebellion is called independence. Entitlement is called empowerment. Control is called communication. And your slow collapse is called maturity. You are not maturing. You are disappearing. You see, dangerous women don't destroy men through open war. They destroy men by teaching them how to self-destruct, politely, gradually, invisibly. The undisciplined woman doesn't need to dominate you. She only needs to convince you to tolerate her behavior. Every silent compromise becomes a quiet lesson. Your standards don't matter. My emotions do. You begin to walk on eggshells. You overthink every word. You measure your tone. You avoid every conversation that might upset her mood. And slowly, your frame collapses. Not because she took it from you, but because you gave it away piece by piece. You convince yourself this is what strong men do. But true strength is not the ability to endure dysfunction. True strength is the ability to reject dysfunction completely. Every time you ignore her disrespect, every time you rationalize her emotional outbursts, every time you justify her selfishness, you are training her to become your master. And once she learns she can break your standards without consequence, she will push further. Because instability feeds on permission, and your silence is her permission. Confucius never taught men to fight women. He taught men to master themselves. Because once you lose mastery over your standards, you lose mastery over your life. She doesn't want partnership. She wants evidence of your submission. And your exhaustion becomes that evidence. You're not leading. You're surviving. You're not loved. You're managed. You're not respected. You're tolerated until you fully disappear. The man who cannot say no will always live as a prisoner to someone else's chaos. And the scariest part, you will call this love until the day you wake up and realize you no longer recognize the man you've become. She doesn't break you like a hurricane. She doesn't destroy you with one act of violence. No, she erodes you slowly, drip by drip, while you convince yourself that you're being a good man. This is not a war you fight. It's a slow surrender you tolerate. The collapse of a man is rarely explosive. It's silent. It's invisible. It's self-inflicted. You think you're choosing peace, but you're only delaying your own destruction. The undisciplined woman doesn't attack you. She lets you attack yourself. She watches as you betray your own values to keep her calm. She watches as you twist your truth into apologies you never should have spoken. Every boundary you soften becomes her new comfort zone. Every time you swallow your voice, you enlarge her sense of control. She doesn't crave equality. She craves dominance disguised as victimhood. She will accuse you of being controlling when you finally enforce standards. She will call you insecure when you finally defend your boundaries. She will label you toxic when you finally refuse to tolerate her emotional chaos. But here's the truth: she will never say out loud. She only fears the man who doesn't need her. She only respects the man who can walk away. You thought love meant endurance, but love without standards is suicide. And slow suicide doesn't feel painful until you're completely gone. You think, if I love her better, she'll stop. If I tolerate more, she'll calm down. If I stay strong, she'll finally see my worth. But brother, the more you tolerate, the more she escalates. The more you give, the more she demands. The more you explain, the more she twists your words. Because submission never satisfies the undisciplined woman, it only emboldens her. You're not building trust. You're building her sense of entitlement. You're not gaining intimacy. You're losing your identity. Confucius said, "To see what is right and not do it, that is the true cowardice." The modern man has been programmed to believe that silence is strength, but silence without standards is weakness in disguise. She doesn't need you to lead. She needs you to surrender. The woman who cannot regulate her emotions will always seek to regulate yours. Not through wisdom, not through partnership, but through guilt, fear, and exhaustion. And the more exhausted you become, the more convinced you are that you're doing the right thing. You think you're fighting for love. You're actually funding your own emotional collapse. One day you'll realize you didn't lose her. You lost yourself trying to keep her. Not because she overpowered you, but because you voluntarily dismantled your own masculine frame, one silent compromise at a time. Confucius never told men to dominate women. He never taught them to control through fear or to silence with force. He taught mastery not of others, but of self. Because once a man loses mastery over his own standards, he has already surrendered everything else. The superior man doesn't drown in her chaos because he refuses to swim in her emotional storm. He doesn't argue, doesn't beg, doesn't plead. He holds the line. He becomes the immovable object that chaos cannot consume. The undisciplined woman cannot thrive in the presence of immovable standards. She either rises to meet your structure or she leaves because she cannot control it. You fear that walking away will cost you her love. But brother, her love was never love if it required your self-destruction to sustain it. True partnership demands alignment, not negotiation of dignity. True love respects discipline. True intimacy honors boundaries. The modern man has been sold a lie. If you tolerate more, she will love you deeper. But reality is colder. The more you tolerate, the more she tests. The more you give, the more she takes. The weaker your frame becomes, the stronger her sense of entitlement grows. Confucius said, "The expectations of life depend upon diligence. The mechanic who would perfect his work must first sharpen his tools." Brother, your tools are your standards, your frame, your boundaries, your self-respect. Without them, you are unfit to build anything that lasts in love, in leadership, or in legacy. The dangerous woman doesn't destroy you because she's evil. She destroys you because you refuse to demand anything better. You fund your own collapse. You sponsor your own erasure. You applaud your own extinction, and all in the name of love. But here's the truth. Love without accountability is not love. Connection without discipline is not intimacy. Partnership without standards is not safety. You were not designed to be her emotional caretaker. You were designed to be her mirror reflecting the discipline she must possess to deserve your leadership. If she resists structure, she rejects love. If she fears your standards, she fears growth. If she calls your boundaries control, what she really fears is losing her ability to manipulate. You are not supposed to carry her storms. You are supposed to become the storm that her chaos cannot shake. The superior man doesn't argue with dysfunction. He simply refuses to entertain it. You don't rescue a woman by tolerating her disorder. You rescue her or yourself by demanding alignment. And if she cannot meet you there, you leave, not in anger, not in desperation, but in quiet, irreversible discipline. Because in the end, there are only two kinds of women: the one who builds with you because she respects your standards, and the one who slowly breaks you because you allowed her to violate them. Confucius would whisper today what few men have the courage to live. The man who does not master his standards will be mastered by another's emotions. The choice was never hers. It was always yours. You were never taught how to test a woman. You were only taught how to attract her. You were taught how to text her, how to compliment her, how to please her, how to win her attention. But you were never taught how to measure her discipline. You were never taught how to observe her reaction to correction. You were never taught how to see her character when denied. And because you never tested her standards, you fell for her performance. You mistook charm for character. You mistook emotional highs for intimacy. You mistook rebellion for strength. But the woman who fears discipline isn't strong. She's unstable. The true test was never how she acted when you gave her everything. The true test was how she responded when you said, "No, this is my standard." Does she respect your leadership, or does she attack your boundaries? Does she grow when corrected, or does she weaponize your patience against you? Most modern men fail this test because they fear the consequence of walking away. They stay. They negotiate. They adapt. And in doing so, they slowly die. Because the undisciplined woman doesn't need your partnership. She needs your submission. You think you're negotiating with her emotions, but you're actually feeding her control. And every ounce of control she gains becomes another layer of your erasure. You no longer speak to lead. You speak to survive. You no longer act to build. You act to avoid conflict. And the man who lives to avoid conflict becomes a hostage inside his own life. Confucius didn't warn you about women. He warned you about chaos. And chaos wears many faces, some of them beautiful. The superior man is modest in his speech, but exceeds in his actions. But the modern man, he explains, he pleads, he debates, he performs his masculinity for women who don't even respect the show. You wear cologne to be smelled. You lift weights to be noticed. You build wealth to be chosen. Yet you remain hollow because everything you build collapses when it's handed to a woman who does not respect structure. The woman you should fear isn't the one who cheats. It's the one who manipulates your standards. The one who slowly rewrites your reality until you're no longer a man but a servant. You don't drown in one storm. You drown in 1,000 drops of self-betrayal. And when you finally wake up, you realize the truth. Confucius whispered thousands of years ago, "Order is not a dream, it is a decision." You don't save yourself by fixing her. You save yourself by becoming untouchable to her chaos, by refusing to fund your own collapse, by protecting your frame as sacred. Because in the end, brother, there are only two kinds of men: the man who builds his house on standards unshaken by emotion, and the man who watches his house crumble while calling his collapse love. You were never taught how to filter a woman. You were taught how to chase her attention, but never how to observe her discipline. You were taught how to win her interest, but never how to test her alignment. And because you were never taught how to test her, you fell for her performance. Her beauty distracted you. Her charm seduced you. Her emotions convinced you that love was present. But you missed the most dangerous truth of all. Attraction is not character. Attention is not compatibility. Chemistry is not stability. The undisciplined woman performs well when she's winning. The true test is how she reacts when she's denied. When you say no, does she respect it? Or does she punish you emotionally? When you set boundaries, does she rise? Or does she call you controlling? Her reaction to discipline exposes everything. A woman who cannot handle limits will never respect your leadership. She doesn't want structure. She wants sovereignty over your emotions. She doesn't want partnership. She wants submission. Modern men confuse chaos for passion. They mistake her volatility for depth. They tell themselves, she's complicated, but that's what makes her special. But complexity without discipline is just disorder. You're not dealing with a passionate woman, you're dealing with an emotionally undisciplined one. And the longer you tolerate it, the more your frame dissolves. You're not strengthening the relationship, you're financing your own erosion. Every argument you avoid, every correction you suppress, every boundary you erase becomes another act of self-betrayal. You start explaining yourself for having standards. You apologize for having boundaries. You negotiate your own self-respect. She doesn't destroy you directly. She simply rewards you every time you lower your guard. Because for the undisciplined woman, your exhaustion is evidence of her control. She doesn't crave peace. She craves proof that you're willing to compromise your masculinity to keep her. And when you're fully drained, she will not see a loyal man. She will see a man she no longer respects. Confucius warned, "He who does not investigate the foundation will have trouble with the structure." Your foundation is your frame. And if you keep negotiating it, the entire structure of your life will collapse. You don't prevent collapse by enduring her instability. You prevent collapse by filtering for women who can live within the weight of your standards. Women who respect masculine order don't need constant emotional validation. They don't weaponize their feelings. They don't see discipline as control. They see boundaries as safety, not oppression. But most men never even reach this stage. They're too afraid to test, too desperate to be chosen, too conditioned to worship beauty above character. And so they lose not because women are evil, but because they abandon the very standards that would have protected them. You're not losing her when you hold standards. You're losing the illusion that beauty can replace discipline. And once that illusion is shattered, you no longer tolerate women who thrive on your collapse. You become unbreakable. Most men think the danger is in losing her. But that was never the real danger. The true danger is losing yourself while trying to keep her. You've been conditioned to believe that relationships are about proving your value, proving your patience, proving your sacrifice, proving how much dysfunction you can absorb before you break. But love that demands your self-erasure isn't love, it's manipulation wearing perfume. Every man reaches a moment where the mask cracks. When he looks into the mirror and realizes he's no longer a man standing tall. He's a man tiptoeing through emotional landmines he created by refusing to enforce his standards. And that's the moment where most men either collapse entirely or awaken. Because what you tolerate becomes your prison. What you enforce becomes your freedom. You think you're keeping her by adjusting, but in reality you're shrinking. You're negotiating away your dignity one quiet compromise at a time, and every time you negotiate you signal weakness. Because here's the brutal truth. Women test men not for cruelty, but to measure the strength of the frame they're submitting to. And when you fail those tests, you train her not to trust you. She doesn't trust a man who adapts to her emotions. She trusts a man who holds his frame even when she resists it. The man she respects is the man who doesn't flinch. The man who stays calm when she escalates. The man who walks away when she crosses lines. Confucius said, "When you see what is right and fail to act, you lack courage." Courage isn't about enduring her moods. Courage is about protecting your standards from becoming negotiable. The superior man doesn't chase approval. He doesn't chase validation. He builds structure. He holds order. He allows only those who can thrive inside that order to remain in his life. You're not oppressing her by having standards. You're protecting yourself from emotional erosion. Because women who respect masculine order will rise to meet your standards. The ones who resent discipline will call your leadership control because they fear accountability. And here's where most men fail. They believe that keeping peace requires compromise. But real peace requires strength, the strength to lose what disrespects your mission. You are not meant to negotiate with chaos. You are meant to outgrow it. Not every woman can handle your discipline. Not every woman deserves access to your leadership. And that's not arrogance. That's responsibility. Because the man who invites undisciplined women into his world is not leading, he's surrendering before the war even begins. You're not choosing between being loved or being feared. You're choosing between being respected or being destroyed. And the truth that most men avoid is simple. You don't lose the right women by holding standards. You lose the wrong women who were never ready for you to begin with. You were not designed to bend. You were designed to lead. The superior man doesn't negotiate his standards. He enforces them not for dominance, but for protection. Because when you negotiate your frame, you don't create peace, you create disorder. The undisciplined woman thrives where your standards evaporate. She doesn't want your leadership. She wants evidence that your leadership can be bought with her emotions. Every time you tolerate her emotional outbursts, every time you absorb her chaos, every time you explain your standards like you're seeking permission, you rewrite the dynamic. She leads, you follow. You think you're being understanding, but understanding without enforcement is self-erasure. The dangerous woman doesn't need to destroy you directly. She teaches you how to destroy yourself, one small surrender at a time. Confucius warned, if the foundation is unstable, the structure will not endure. Your frame is that foundation. It is not built on how well you perform for her. It is built on what you refuse to compromise. Boundaries aren't cages, they are shields. Standards aren't control, they are architecture. Discipline isn't cold, it is love elevated beyond emotion. Most men think discipline repels women, but here's the truth. Only undisciplined women fear discipline. High-value women respect it. Because a woman who respects you doesn't resent your standards, she feels safest inside them. The unstable woman fears your discipline because she knows it limits her ability to manipulate. She doesn't want your leadership, she wants your submission to her instability. She doesn't want partnership, she wants sovereignty over your emotions. And when you grant her that power, you don't create love, you manufacture slavery. The unbreakable man isn't cold. He isn't emotionless. He is simply unmoved by emotional threats. He does not fear walking away. He does not negotiate under pressure. He does not sacrifice long-term structure for short-term comfort. Because the moment your standards are for sale, your leadership is dead. The unbreakable masculine frame isn't about controlling her, it's about mastering you. It's the refusal to betray your mission, the discipline to protect your peace, the courage to lose anyone who demands your self-destruction as the price for their affection. You are not here to earn approval. You are here to establish order. Order within yourself. Order within your relationships. Order within your kingdom. Because once your frame collapses, your kingdom dies quietly, painfully, invisibly. The undisciplined man blames her. The superior man holds himself accountable for what he allowed. You allowed the erosion. You sponsored your own collapse. You sold your standards for comfort, and comfort became your executioner. But now you see. Now you know. And now you choose differently. Because once you become unbreakable, you no longer fear losing her, she fears losing access to your world. And that, brother, is where true masculine sovereignty begins. In the end, brother, you were never at war with her. You were at war with your own fear. The fear of being alone. The fear of setting standards she might not accept. The fear of enforcing discipline and losing what you thought was love. But love that demands your surrender isn't love. It's slow self-erasure. The superior man doesn't beg for alignment. He embodies it. He doesn't chase peace through negotiation. He creates peace through non-negotiable standards. You don't lead by adjusting to chaos. You lead by refusing to invite it. Not every woman is ready for your discipline. And that's not your failure. That's your filter. You were not designed to carry her instability. You were designed to carry your mission with clarity, restraint, and unshakable presence. Because at the end of this path, there are only two types of men. The man who betrays his standards to keep temporary comfort, and the man who protects his standards and builds a life no woman can manipulate. Choose wisely. Because your standards are not just for you. They are the foundation of everything you will build.